O Yahweh, open up you my lips, and let my mouth show forth your praise. Kuma, Yahweh, Wayaputsu o Yaveka, Wayanusa Misanecha Mikaniacha. Kuma, Yahweh, Wayaputsu o Yaveka, Wayanusa Misanecha Mikaniacha. Arise of you, O Yahweh. Let your enemies be scattered, and let those that hate thee flee from before thee. Let all of Yasharah, Yisrael, who love, worship, and praise Yahweh, give him thanks by saying Hallelujah.
Federal law allows citizens to reproduce, distribute, or exhibit portions of copyrighted motion pictures, videotapes, or video discs under certain circumstances without authorization of the copyright holder. This is called fair use and is allowed for purposes of criticism, news reporting, teaching, and parody, which doesn't infringe of copyright under 17 U.S.C. 107.
O Yahweh, Kuma, Yahweh, Wayaputsu o Yaveka, Wayanusa Misanecha Mikaniacha. Arise of you, O Yahweh. Let your enemies be scattered, and let those that hate thee flee from before thee. Give him thanks by saying Hallelujah.
All right, shalom everyone, and welcome to Into All Truth. May the Ruach HaKodesh lead you into all truth and show you things to come, and the seed of the word be planted in your heart to bring forth the fruit of righteousness. So, family, today we are talking about Prester John and the Ethiopians, the key to the lands of Shem, Ham, and Japheth, the four rivers, beasts, carpenters, and the fourth beast. So I'm going to begin this series, probably the next part will take another month, by dealing with the geography of the land according to the location of the Ethiopians and the scattering of Israel. And so what I want to do is to begin with, as usual, my Hebraic principles, which you can find on my blog on intoalltruth.net. And I always use these Hebraic principles of teaching the end from the beginning to see the pattern of Yasharal's sin and Yah's redemption of his chosen family, Yasharal, throughout Scripture. 2 or more witnesses is what I use. What has happened before will happen again. Yah says a thing once, and it speaks twice, precept upon precept, line upon line. And so here are the scriptures that go with that. All right, fam. So today I am going to prove to you the location of the land of the Ethiopians and the Cushites, and overall the lands of Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Of course, we can't see the South Pacific in this map, but this is basically the layout of the 4 rivers that extend from the Jordan River. All right, so the 4 rivers of Eden plus the Jordan, because there's 5 rivers total. All right, and this is how we are going to orient ourselves in the map of the earth according to the inheritance of the lots of Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And from there we can narrow down to figure out who the true Ethiopians are, who the Edomites and Assyrians are, who the mixed multitude of the Shemites are, and the evolution of the stolen identities on the negative side, or the grafting in on the positive side. And so it's important to understand that the Ethiopians were a very sacred people to Yahuwah and continue to be, and they were descendants of Abraham and Ketura. They were grafted in through Moses and Zipporah, through Jethro, one of the descendants of Ketura, through her son Midian. And for a third time, these Ethiopians were grafted in through King Solomon and Queen Sheba. And they have been given a specific priesthood promise forever, just as the Medo-Persians of Japheth also were given through Cyrus, the servant of Yahuwah. And so these are the righteous Shemites, these are the righteous Hamites, and the righteous Japhethites, all right, who are grafted into Israel. So they have a special place in Yahuwah's heart. But of course, Esau, Edom had to go ahead and steal the Ethiopian identity to become the grand Prester John, who then usurped Israel, broke the yoke of Jacob off his neck, and is now ruling the world, and is, according to 2nd Esdras, the end of the world. And so this is a basic layout of the lands of Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And of course, the South Pacific also belongs to Ham. But what we need to understand is that I'm going to show you there are 3 Ethiopias, which are 3 Cushes, which are 3 Indias, which are 3 Havilas. All right? It can seem a bit confusing, but this is why we have to establish the lands of Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And this is according to the north, south, east, west directions and the territories of Shem, Ham, and Japheth as defined by those cardinal directions and the 4 rivers of Eden extending from the Jordan River. And so the Jordan River, I'm going to prove to you, originates from Lake Zaire here, which is near the Zambezi and Congo River, where they emanate from.
An Atlas Obscura description of the source of the Zambezi as a tourist spot reads like another of the many poorly crafted Western lies, yet also seems to tell the truth. The source of the Zambezi is located in a small protected forest. It's surrounded by rich Miombo woodlands and a strip of Mishutu forest. Within the protected forest, elevated wooden walkways lead to the source and follow the path of the river down the valley for some distance. The source itself is a small spring that bubbles beneath the bottom of a fallen tree. Now, if you're familiar with the concept of ancient tree or ancient trees, you will know that many of the large mountains we see on Earth are the remaining stumps of giant trees. Not all, but some. Ezekiel 31:17 states that all of the trees of Eden, including the best from Lebanon, were brought down to the grave. They fell down, and we know that Eden is associated with the tree of life and many trees falling from it. So Ezekiel 31:18 describes the Almighty bringing down a tree representing Pharaoh and the people of Egypt. Do you know, in fact, that there is an African tree, the baobab tree, that is famous for housing water within it for entire villages, even in droughts? A large baobab can store as much as 136,000 liters of water, according to southward.net. In Madagascar, they are natural cisterns. The barrel of the trunk of the baobab, characterized by a trunk that can reach around 8 meters, is sort of a natural air-conditioned cistern capable of holding and conserving rainwater. It is how the Mahafale communities cope with the harshest and hottest periods of the year. According to Enoch, the angels made a work of the trees. They cut them down. This is the reason for less oxygen on the planet and our resulting smaller stature mentioned in the book of 2nd Esdras. Says Enoch chapter 66, in those days the word of Elohim came to me and said, Noah, behold, thy lot has ascended up to me, a lot void of crime, a lot beloved and upright. Now then shall the angels labor at the trees, but when they proceed to do this, I will put my hand upon it and preserve it. So why am I saying this? Well, when we look at this 1655 Kirchner map of Africa, around Zaire and the Congo and everything, we see that there are, 5 large bodies of water here. One is Lake Malemba up there, and it looks like Zaire near the center, and maybe to the top right is Lake Victoria. There's some other lake here, but we come down to the bottom and we see this kind of mountain-looking thing with water inside of it. Didn't Moses strike the rock in Psalm 28:21 and Numbers 20 and water issue forth? Absolutely. Read the scripture here. And let's look at the map today. When we look at the map today, again, we just see three large bodies of water. Maybe it's because it's further away, and this is from another more ancient map on the left, but on the right, we go over and we just see the largest lake is Lake Malawi on the bottom right, and then in Mozambique, and then up at the top in Kenya and Uganda, we see Lake Victoria. So what happened to these other lakes and waters? Let's take a look at another map. On this Liechtenstein 1596 map, we see on the left there is a Lake Zaire, and then we see on the right there is the old Abyssinia, which is called Lake Victoria today. So they've been hiding things. Again, on this map, we see mountains containing water. Now, Zaire is very much a word like Mount Seir, and there was Mount Seir in the southwestern kingdom of Judah. In this choreograph in Origina Sinilis, so that could that be origins of the Nile origins, or Sinai origins, or Nile source? We see the Amorite Mountains and the Horite Mountains. Amorite Mountains, Mounds Hores. And this is basically in the same spot on just a different version of that map. And we see all these pools and lakes and waters that are dividing and dividing again, right? And so this is basically in the same spot. So the source of the Nile, which, again, is Jordan, think of it as the Jordan, is something of a mystery. And it's said to be sourced from a small stream in Zaire, which is where ancient maps locate Lake Zaire. And the Zambezi River is said to be flowing out of Zaire, and it's key to the location of the Jordan. And of course, key to this is the location of the Mosiah Tunya Falls, aka the Victoria Falls. That's what they call them Mosiah Tunya Falls in Africa. They don't call them Victoria Falls. They've always been called Mosiah Tunya Falls. So for 10 kilometers, as one approaches the falls, a friend of mine told me about this when he went there, because I told him about all this, so he went there. And he said for 10 kilometers, as you drive towards the falls, the Mosiah Tunya Falls, there is a sound of thunder and rumbling vibrating along the highway leading to the falls. And I'm like, is that just the sound of water? He said, no, you can feel it underneath you. It sounds like thunder. Now, I suspect this is because the water source is actually beneath the road. Okay, as these ancient maps testify to, all the water sources being beneath the mountains. All right? And this is why David's Psalm 27 says, deep calleth unto deep at the noise of thy waterspouts. So then one reaches Mosiah Tunya Falls with Messiah and Yah actually in the name. So it's like salvation and the tree of Yah. So the tree of life. The tree of life was in the Garden of Eden, Jordan River location. Okay? So I hope that helps you. And that's not just symbolism. That's the word. Mosiah Tunya Falls. Tree of the seed falls. Seed of Yah. All right? And so this clearly marks the important spot. According to the Book of Beginnings, the Jordan River was also called Yar or Ayar because there's no J's in Hebrew, so it was called the Yarden. According to Alas Gellius, Egypt was named Aria. The Egyptian Ur, remember Ur of the Chaldeans, right? The Ur are the Chaldeans or Kastim, the Shemites. So Ur or Air is the name of the river, the Hebrew Ayar or Nile. Area is the land of the river, possibly with the further meaning of the pure, as Ia means to wash, whiten, or purify. Another name of Egypt is Tamari. Ta is to drop, heap, deposit type. Mary is the inundation. So Tamari is land thus deposited, or water inundated, an inundation of water. So the vulgar English To ta is a child's word. It means to deposit soil. Also, Tamari reads, the gift of the inundation, the gift of the goddess Mari, who has a dual form as Meresh, meaning south, and Merhi, meaning north. So Meresh, really Mer means water and Resh means head. So this is the head waters. And so this Jordan River was actually named the Nile by the Greeks. It was named the Nile by the Greeks, but it was originally the Jordan River. And I'm going to show you also that the Yarden, or the Nile, was known as the 0 point of the earth. It was known as the original prime meridian on the planet. Not the 30 degrees prime meridian that was invented in the 1800s, that is supposed to be called the 0 degrees and the 30-degree point all at once, which is in this region over here between the two continents of North America and Africa. But the original prime meridian was always the Jordan, aka renamed the Nile. All right, it's the 0 point on the earth. And so the Pishon River is one of the first rivers mentioned, and it sprays down. It's Pishon because it's like to blow, scatter, hedge. And it sprays down the chin of Africa like this. And it goes and circulates into lands where there is gold. There's a lot of gold in Zimbabwe. It also sprays over into the west, into the land of Cush, where there is also a lot of gold in Havilah. And there are other places where there are gold, which is up around, obviously, the land of the Aramites, Babylon, Elam, which is Ethiopia, and Medo-Persia and Arabia has a lot of gold as well, or renowned to have gold. All right? And so the Jordan River also extends up north, and on its way up, it shoots west. You see here it says Guinea. All right, because this was originally the Gihon River. So you see it says Guinea here. So this was the original Gihon River. And we know there's a Ghana here. We know there's a British Guyana over here that intersect. There's actually a Brasilia down here. Moshe Brasilia, a land called Moshe Brasilia down here. And it connects with Brazil over here. All right, I hope that makes sense. And so this is how we can connect the Gihon to being over here. And the Gihon River is said to surround the whole land of Cush. How does it do that? Because when the Gihon, which is currently called the Niger River, heads into the west, it heads over here into the region of Florida and into the Gulf of Mexico, and then it goes around into the land of Cush. It dips into the Amazon River and then goes all the way down to the south. And so everything west of that Amazon River and everything surrounding the Gulf of Mexico and everything everything west of that is the land of Ham. This portion would be Egypt. This portion here is Cush, all right? And so that's why they say the Gihon surrounds the whole land of Cush. Now, there's a portion of the Congo River up here that also enters in here into the Amazon and the river that moves laterally across here in South America. So this is how we get the clarification that the Gihon surrounds the whole land of Cush. So there's a Cush here. This is one of the first Cushes / India / Ethiopia. The other Cush / India / Ethiopia is here. And these regions outside of here were known to be Cush as well, Cathay. And of course, Ethiopia eventually moved into Central Africa to become the lower Ethiopia around Libya here, and the upper Ethiopia, Abyssinia, it was originally called Abyssinia in Africa. So we've defined the Pishon, we've defined the Gihon. Now we're going to define the other two great rivers coming out of the Jordan / Nile, okay? And there is part of the Gihon River that looks like this mouth that is blowing and scattering, and that is the Congo that dumps into the Atlantic Ocean and then over into South America along that lateral line, all right? And so again, that could be part of the Pishon spraying. Pishon, the Gihon, as it moves around this land of Kata or Challa, all right, Kush. And now we're heading up north on the Jordan River, which was renamed the Nile. And we find that it pushes up into the Black Sea, which was originally called the Niagara Sea or Negro Sea, Niagara Sea. And there's actually a river that goes all the way across here. Also, the Mediterranean never existed before. It's only a recent discovery. It was only recently broke open in the last several hundred years. But originally, you know, whether it was the Mediterranean or the river that was up here, this is the river Euphrates. How do we know that? Because it goes out of the Niagara, the Mare Niagara, the Mare Negro, all the way across the Atlantic or Ethiopic Sea into North America and into what is called today Niagara Falls. Now, the Niagara Falls didn't exist before. Before there was a huge, and those Great Lakes didn't exist either. There was a huge river that went all the way across the continent of North America, all the way to the west. And streaming down from that large river, it was the Mississippi, the true Nile, which went all the way again into the Atlantic. So let's look at some other maps that prove this. So we see here that this large river coming out of the Mare Negro into the Niagara Falls. See, there's no Great Lakes here on this ancient map. Here's the name of it, Terra Asialo. And it went all the way to Septeronia, North America, and all the way across the continent. There's also an ancient Septimus map that proves the same thing. So this America Sivi Novi Orbis map, all right, it's Ortelius's map, you can see very clearly has this river going all the way across North America, all the way into the Pacific. Okay? All right? And we can see again how the Gihon is going all the way around this land, all right? Which everything, again, west of the Gihon and west of the Amazon would be the land of Cush. I hope that makes sense. All right, so we see the same thing again. We see this major break into the land of Cush coming from over here, you see? So we see this is a much better representation of the Nile or Jordan going up and pushing up here into the Black Sea. It also pushes over into the Caspian Sea, all right? The Mare Negro Sea and into the water, or you could say that it goes out of the Mediterranean and all the way over here. This is why we have these 7 great Gulf streams in here, because they are these major waterways pushing across into North America from the beautiful land of Africa, from Zaire, from Eden, all right, all the way over to here. And so this is where we get these rivers from. So we've got the Pishon, we went over the Gihon, we went over the Euphrates, and it is called the Great River Euphrates because now we go over to Hiddekel. And oh, by the way, this Euphrates goes all the way across Persia and down into the ocean also. So that's why the Euphrates is there. Now, when we look at the Caspian Sea, right, the largest lake body of water on the planet, it pushes eastward as the Hiddekel, or the Tigris River. And it's very important that this is called the Tigris River because it refers to Tigray, which references the Tigray Ethiopians, all right? And it references
the lands of the western lands of Ham on this side, okay? And this Hiddekel River, not only does it dump down into the ocean as the Ganges, but it also heads all the way into the Pacific as the Yangtze River. So the Ganges is the Yangtze, and that is the Hiddekel, all right? And these waterways define the lands of Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And now Shem got half the planet, okay, because he was the firstborn son, and we're going to go over that with you. So what we are showing here as the royal bluish purple here is the land of Abraham. All right, so these lands I've made kind of a different color blue because these are Shem's lands also, but they are not part of Abraham's land. Abraham got everything up until the great river Euphrates, all right? And everything over towards the Nile, or the river of Egypt, or the Egyptian Sea, all right? So this area between North America and Africa was also known as the Egyptian Sea. And I already showed you that the Mississippi was the original Nile, okay? So he got everything up until the Egyptian Sea, and he got everything all the way over to, once again, the Euphrates. So the Euphrates is beyond, this is the Euphrates here, goes all the way across here. So the Euphrates is anything above the Euphrates in Western Europe and beyond the Euphrates in the so-called Middle East. And this is where the Ethiopians ended up settling. This land was called Elam. Elam. And so this is where Ketura the Cushite, the second wife of Abraham, she and her 6 sons settled here. And incidentally, so did Ishmael. So his 7 other sons settled in this region near Medo-Persia, between the land of Aram. Now, Aram's land was the whole of India, all right? Why? Because he was beside the great river of Babylon, which is Hiddekel. And so I'm going to go through this study with you and prove to you that all of this is true as we look at the movements, the scattering of Israel and the movements of the Ethiopians and Esau, Edom into the promised land, the head of the earth. Because the earth itself reflects the face of Yah, and this Africa is his head. And this is why it is the 0 point. And I'm going to prove to you also that it is where Jerusalem is, which is the zero point of the entire earth. And I've proven that to you with my calendar video. So if you now understand the lay of this land, I've also called this Samaria. We're going to find out that anything outside of the land of Abraham that is over here or on the near Africa is called Samaria. All right. Samaria are the lands of the Shemites that were somewhat shared by the northern kingdom. All right. And so this is why this area is kind of called Samaria. Samaria. All right. And that's who the Ethiopians, the Medo-Persians, and the Ishmaelites, because they're mixed, they dwelt in Samaria. And they had a genetic relationship to Israel. And along with Esau, Edom, and the rest of the Shemites, they became confederate against Israel. But they were also a blessing to Israel, the Ethiopians in particular, and the Medo-Persians. So I'm going to show you all of that because all of these other Shemitic mixed groups are called Ethiopians eventually. But it started with the sons of Ketura and evolved into the descendants of Sheba, all right, as a promised priesthood that was grafted into Israel. And so let's get into the study. Just put a 1 in the chat, family, if you've understood this, if this is clear to you, and just put a note on the leaderboard or put a note in the chat about the points that seem the most relevant to you that you understood very well. Points like Shem's area is outside Abraham's land, but shared with Shem. All right? And Abraham's land is the head of the earth, Africa. So points like that. The Euphrates goes all the way across North America. And the Hiddekel or Yangtze goes all the way across Asia. Another thing I'm going to show you, family, is that these waterways, as I've said before, divide lands. And east, in order to perpetrate this identity theft and confusion in the earth, what had to happen was they had to switch east and west. So in these books, things become confusing because they're switching our concept of east and west. And I'm first going to show you the law of the firstborn son and show you that Shem's land is the south and the east alone. And so everything beyond the Hiddekel is west. All right? Everything above the Euphrates, when you combine the Euphrates and the Hiddekel together, everything above that, generally speaking, is Japheth's land. That's the north. And the west, as we can see, the west is on both sides here. The west is the land of Ham. How do we know? The law of the firstborn son, Deuteronomy 21:15 through 22. And what this law says is, if a man has 2 wives, one beloved and the other hated, and they have borne him children, both the beloved and the hated, and if the firstborn son be hers that was hated, then it shall be, when he maketh his sons to inherit that which he hath, he may not make the son of the beloved firstborn before the son of the hated. So your second wife, her son can't be put before the son of your first wife, the son of the hated, which is indeed the firstborn. But he shall acknowledge the son of the hated for the firstborn by giving him a double portion of all that he hath, for he is the beginning of his strength, and the right of the firstborn is his. Now, we have seen this law defied by Abraham and by Jacob, and the problems that it occurred because of it, the divisions and the hatred, the enmity with Israel and within Israel. This is why YAH set up this law. But why am I saying this to you? Because YAH has said in Exodus 4:22, Israel is my firstborn son. It's repeated 3 times throughout Scripture. Israel is my firstborn. And Shem was the firstborn son of Noah. And so he got the largest portion of the earth. He got half of the entire planet. But here's the caveat here. It says, if a man have a stubborn and rebellious son, which will not obey the voice of his father and the voice of his mother, and that when they have chastened him will not hearken unto them, then shall his father and his mother lay hold upon him and bring him out unto the elders of the city, unto the gate of his palace. And they shall say unto the elders of his city, this our son is stubborn and rebellious. He will not obey our voice. He is a glutton and a drunkard. And all the men of this city shall stone him with stones, that he die, so that thou put away evil from among you, and all Israel shall hear and fear. So, and if a man have committed a sin worthy of death, he be to be put to death, and thou hang him on a tree. So this is actually what happened to Israel, because Israel did become a drunkard and a glutton and rebellious and adulterous and went with strange women and nations. And so the firstborn son position got moved over to Japheth. It went right past Ham, though, because Ham was rebellious and wicked. All right? And it went over to Japheth. This is why Japheth enlarged his territory. But it was only for a season, because of, in Jubilees, the lots of Shem, Ham, and Japheth were clearly established, and everyone agreed that they and their offspring would be cursed if they went outside of their lands. So we're in that time where everyone has to, each man return to their own land according to the command of Yah at this time. But that is the law of the firstborn, and that is why Shem got half the planet. And so this is Shem's land, the south and the east. And this is Japheth's land, the north, and Ham's land, the west. All right? And so this is some of the evidence we have that, in fact, India was originally Black Negro Shemitic. These are the ancient black people who resided in what is called India now. And so they have thick lips, and this is their kinky hair. All right? Their cornrows or twisted afros. And this is what the current Dravidians look like. And the Untouchables are also supposed to be the original Shemites in India. So these are the true Yasharalites. We'll get into that. So the land of the west actually belongs to Ham, and the land of the north belongs to Japheth. And so that's where we get this picture from. And Japheth actually gets kind of the firstborn son position, which is why he wound up overrunning the whole world and taking it over and terribly managing it, which is where we are today. But that's why he spread himself out over the world. And so this is where you see Shem's land is Asia, Isaiah, okay? That's really how you spell Isaiah. You may spell it with a yod at the beginning. It's Shem's land, half the planet. Then Ham and Japheth each get a quarter. The west and the north. All right, so it's very important to understand these directions. Please watch my video on the 4 beasts. All right, 2-part, it goes into the geography in a really detailed way. I may post that as a video on its own. So in Hebrew, the word negid means east. So like Nagid, Niger, Nagad, Niger is all tied to the word east. Nag, all tied to the east. All right? And Kadim is the word for the south. The Kadim is the word for the south. So the south and the east are Shem's land. That's where Yah descends and dwells. That's where the 4 rivers issue from. And his symbol is the lion. And Orion points to the east. He also has the Pleiades and the Big Dippers above the lands of Shem and the northern kingdom, symbolizing the 7 spirits of the 7 churches. So it is both the east and the south. And it is India, Africa, Western Europe, and half of South America. And this is recorded as the best land. In Enoch chapter 2, verses 85 to 86, it says, the first quarter is called the east because it is the first. All right, so that's why the east is very important. And the second, the south, because the Most High will descend there, yea, there in quite a special sense, will he who is blessed forever descend. And the west quarter is named the diminished because there all the luminaries of heaven wane and go down. So the west does not necessarily have a positive connotation, though from creation everything was good. So we're now going to see that the other sons of Abraham and Noah, that is Shem, moved into Israel. And then, of course, the devil, as I've said many times, changed east and west to confuse the world and identities in order to enable this to happen. Now, Proverbs 22 and 28 says, do not move an ancient boundary stone which your fathers have placed. Okay, why? These are the lots of Shem, Ham, and Japheth in accordance with the curses indicated in Jubilees for anyone who sought to seize his brother's land. And this accounts for the shifting of the scriptural understanding of boundaries of land lots by Ham and Japheth interloping into and colonizing the lands of Shem. So the devil switched everything around and confused everybody in order to entice everyone into each other's lands. And of course, a whole bunch of people knew what they were doing too. Wasn't it just the devil? Now, obviously, the Shemites interloped into Ham and Japheth's lands to practice Egypto-Babylonian idolatry also. And of course, Israel did too. Northern Kingdom went to the land of Greece, went to Tartaria, right? So it's important to remember that the land allotments of Yahuwah took into account the entire earth. Yahuwah is omniscient. He knows all. He's omnipresent. That means he's present everywhere. He's omnipotent, all-powerful. So the forefathers, like Enoch and Noah, knew the extent of the earth from the beginning and brought the writings of Enoch on the ark, which were passed on in the priesthood to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and the 12 tribes. So, and they were even, I believe, in their possession when they leave Egypt. And Jubilees witnesses to the shape of the entire earth. And that's a book that Moses wrote, all right? So please, again, watch 4 Beasts of the River Euphrates, Global Geography, to get a deeper study on the topic, and my Lots of Shem, Ham, and Japheth playlist. So Jubilees 8, Shem has the Garden of Eden for his homeland. How do we know? It says, and Noah is pleased, that is Shem's lot, came out that way from Yahuwah, okay? So it says here in Jubilees 8, this portion came forth by Lot for Shem and his sons, that they should possess it forever, unto his generations forevermore. And Noah rejoiced that this portion came forth for Shem and his sons, and he remembered all that he had spoken with his mouth in prophecy. For he had said, blessed be Yahuwah Elohim of Shem, and may Yahuwah dwell in the dwelling of Shem. And he knew the Garden of Eden is the Holy of Holies and the dwelling of Yahuwah, and Mount Sinai, the center of the desert, and Mount Zion, the center of the navel of the earth. All right? So this is how we know that the times and seasons are called out from Zion. And Mount Zion, the center of the navel of the earth, these 3 were created as holy. And that's why it says Yahuwah descends in the south also, the south and the east. So it's clear that Eden, Jerusalem, the land of Shem, is the navel of the earth. And this is how we can orient ourselves in relation to the 4 rivers and locations of the lands of Shem, Ham, and Japheth. So my video on the Enochian calendar also proves the location of Jerusalem as the navel of the earth by the 0 sun noon. And of course, by Jerusalem being in the sides of the north. Please watch the video for more detail on why ancient building techniques used the 0 shadow noon as the supreme plumb line measure, only available along the equator. And this is the official 0 degrees north. Remember, it says Jerusalem is in the sides of the north, and Israel is told, now you've gone around this Mount Sinai long enough, now turn northwards. All right, so then they head to Jerusalem. So, and this is literally in the Congo, and Pangaea divided, I want you to understand, all the other nations away from Africa. So Africa is essentially the anchor of the earth, and the sun and everything followed it, all right? And it is the equatorial or equinoctial ley lines which have been the building standard for ancient temples and structures. The shadow, 0 shadow, and the sun. That's according to Gerald Hawkins. In other words, this 0 shadow measure, this solar noon, was always used to construct temples. That means when, at the time of the equinox in the spring, when you hold up a stick, it creates no shadow. And this is witnessed at Ezekiel's altar in Ezekiel 43:13-17. This temple blueprint matches the eastern gate illumination in Ezekiel 44:1-2. And this is also the place where summer and winter solstice have to create a 0 shadow solar noon, okay, further to the north, okay? All right, and then there are underground springs of Jerusalem that were coming out of the Gihon River, and they directed the Gihon River, which actually goes away from Israel to the west, and they redirected it back towards Israel. In 2 Chronicles, this is noted. So when we're looking for the location of Jerusalem, you have to have the Gihon being redirected back to the location of Israel. All right, so just keep that in mind. So the Nile served as the central line for mapping and navigation within their known world at the time, and the Jordan is the Nile in Africa. Now, the scripture says in Zephaniah 3:10, from beyond the rivers of Ethiopia, my suppliants, even the daughter of my dispersed, shall bring me mine offering. So what does this beyond the rivers of Ethiopia phrase mean? What is it referring to? It is referring to the Gihon River beyond the rivers of Gihon, which is where the Israelites eventually end up in the west. But it's also referring to the true rivers of Ethiopia in Elam, where the Ethiopian descendants of Ketura and Abraham dwelt. And so this is beyond the river Euphrates, where Israel was scattered to. And so there's a quote in 2 Esdras 13:41 that says the following. Who took this counsel among themselves, that they would leave the multitude of the heathen and go forth into a further country where never mankind dwelt, that they might there keep their statutes, which they never kept in their own land. And they entered into the Euphrates by the narrow places of the river, for the Most High showed signs for them and held still the flood till they were passed over. For through that country there was a great way to go, namely a year and a half, and the same region is called Arzareth. And they dwelt there until the latter time. And now when they shall begin to come, the Most Highest will stay the springs of the stream again, that they may go through. Therefore sawest thou the multitude with peace. And so here we have this ancient map of Tartaria. And what we notice, you can't see it very well here, but I'll put it in the video as well. But what we have here is we have some of the 10 tribes located here as we're getting close to the Bering Crossing, and Canada over here on the other side, North America. And there was a lady called, I think her channel is Uncovering Our Hidden History, and she did a translation of all of these words. I've commented on this before and noted that we see Dan and Issachar, etc. here. But let's take a look at her translation, all right, of these various texts. So it's Uncovering Our Hidden History is the YouTube channel. And these are some of the things that it says here in these 5 quotes. So here we see Arzareth, which we, can very easily see. And so here again is Tartaria. And here's some of the translations again. And so one of the quotes here, when we look up here, we're looking for Dan, the tribe of Dan, all right? And it says Danorium, Scythian promontory of the Dani or Danati, a tribe which disappeared because it had been expelled or has left, all right? And then the important name we see here also is Naphtali. And it says the Naphalites are named Naphtali after one of the 10 tribes with a Hebrew name after the Danites, who by way of punishment were called the Danes of the Dark North. And they were called this on account of claims of Rachel Balba and placed to the side in the area of Hudors Tudoris, in other words, the Tudors, right? Opened the 2-leaved gates for the dark treasures of Israel, right? And in the year 476, they were victorious in the battle against Persia. So that gives you some history about the fact that these are actually the tribe of Naphtali and the tribe of Dan. Now they also have the word Argon here, and Argon says there was formerly a kingdom of Christians under the Prester John in Asia, established there by Saint Thomas to correspond to the Roman Church, obedient to the Prester John Africanus. So we know he was an African before it was conquered by the Goths, and it was called the Roman Church. All right. So that's what we see here as well. And what it says here is, according to 2 Ezra chapter 13, this is Arzareth. All right, here the 10 tribes seceded and they substituted the Scythians with the Tartars. Since then, they are called the Goths or the Gothans to the highest glory of God and are said to be asserted here. And here lies the splendid kingdom of Cathay. So we're going to find Cathay is another version of Cush, like I've said, and refers to the Catholic Church. Now, I believe they say this because the Scythians switched identities with them, took on their identity. That's why I think that they're saying that this was a splendid thing to the highest glory of God that happened, that this was how the Gentiles were grafted in through the Scythians, through these 10 tribes. And then it mentions a Tabor here, Tabor, and it says the umbilical region of the Tartars, where formerly they lost their holy books, yet they are not united under one king who is in 1540 first reached Gaul, France, and King Franciscus. Later, at the initiative of Charles V, their king was burnt at the stake for his heresy, for he had secretly endeavored to convert the Christian kings to the Judaic religion. So they were Judaizing. They were trying to hold to the law. That's what the second Ezra's quote says, that they wanted to go to a netherland where they could keep the law. And we see here they're being called Tartars. Now, Tartar, I believe, ties to the Turkish and Tyre. Naphtali was right up against Tyre. And that is why Hiram Abiff, the architect, was trained to in architecture and helped build Solomon's temple, because he was right up, he was a widow's son from Tyre. All right, so Tyre or Tartars can refer to tares, wheat among tares, or tares thrown out. It can also refer to Tyre and, of course, Tartarus, the netherworld of Tartarus, all right, where dead things come up from out of the sea. The important thing to understand was that these people in this region were the 10 tribes. They were being scattered further west and west, and they had been known to be Judaizers. So they were teaching the law, which is never done away with, according to scripture. And so this gives us some orientation. So here we have Terra Azeret. You can see this is the original 500-year-old Canadian map that is on the government site. And we see Terra Azeret is right here. That's probably around Alaska and what used to be the Northwest Territories and Nunavut, etc. And it's called Zangar here. And we see Tibet over here. So this is where they went. But on the way there, they had to pass through Tartaria. And so I always show this slide, which shows the translation from the Hebrew, all right, for Arzarath. And it means the final place out of mind, the vanishing point, time out of mind. So this is where Israel loses their mind and identity and goes, you know, right into paganism and then wakes up from. And so this is, the verse 41 says they went to another country, and it's in Hebrew, it's another world, olam, which means vanishing point. It also means time out of mind, and eternity, the everlasting world or another world or the new world. But olam means eternal and vanishing point. So this is also the place of the end of the world of Israel, and then the end of the world of Edom. So Terra Azarath, and we know clearly it's North America. So it was Eastern Europe, right? Or really Western Europe. And it was North America that they scattered to. And then Isaiah 43:3, for I am Yahuwah your Elohim, the Holy One of Israel, thy Savior. I gave Egypt for thy ransom, Ethiopia and Sheba for thee. So the Ethiopians and Prester John, the Edomite priest king, and various groups with which they became confederate. Help us to define four things, as I said: the lands of Shem, Ham, and Japheth, the four rivers, the four beasts, who are the four carpenters, all right, and the final fourth beast. And so in this study, we're going to look at the geography of Israel according to the scattering of Israel and the four rivers of Eden, because this is how we identify the land of Shem and Abraham. And we will include the integration of the Ethiopians and Arabs into the land of Abraham, for they were cast outside of it into the land of Shem, Elam. The discussion of the location of the land of Ethiopia, there being three Ethiopias, is important to distinguishing between the Ethiopians and the Cushites, because the terms are used interchangeably, but they're not the same. The Ethiopians descend from Ketura, the Cushite, second wife of Abraham, and their offspring, the queen of Sheba, versus the true Cushites, whose father is Cush, son of Ham. The process of stealing Israel's land and identity has been the conflation, or the mixing and confusing of names. So it's important to see how they connect to Prester John, the Edomite, who integrated in with them and stole their identity. And of course, how all of this is connected to the confederacy that is against Israel.
And this is the official Prester John map that is in John Ogilvie's book on Africa. So he, at his time, when he wrote that book, he recognized Prester John as a true ruler and emperor.
The land of Israel was promised to the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Even Abraham was promised to be the father of many nations. Abraham fathered Isaac and 7 other sons, including the Ethiopians and the Ishmaelites. Now, Isaac fathered Jacob and the Edomites. And of course, Jacob fathered the 12 tribes of Israel, who themselves were mixed in Jeremiah 31:27 with the seed of man and beast in our scattering, okay? Now, we were also commanded to preach the gospel, or the good news, the Besorah, to every creature. Mark 16 and 15. In fact, every creature waits for the sons of Yahweh to be revealed in Romans 8 and 19. And so that's why Israel was scattered. And we're going to see that there is a pattern of certain people dwelling in the land and participating in that scattering from the beginning of time. What has happened before will happen again. So from the beginning of the 12 tribes of Israel, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So when we look at the promise of Esau, Edom from Isaac, he is not the genetic seed of the promise according to Romans 9 and 13. All right? Yahuwah says, while the twins were yet in Rebekah's womb, Esau I hated, and Jacob I loved. The elder, that is Esau, shall serve the younger, who is Jacob. And it is declared, the seed of Jacob is the seed of the father, the seed of the promise, whose fathers are Abraham and Isaac, both. Now, the grafted in are a partially genetic or spiritual seed. Okay, so some of the grafted in are, not genetically the seed of Israel, but they spiritually are. And some of them are genetically grafted in to the seed of Israel. All right, but the specific true seed of Israel is the genetic and spiritual seed of Israel. All right, and that is not Esau, Edom. And that's what Romans 9:13 clarifies. All right, so I'm just setting you up to understand how Esau goes to steal the blessing through Prester John. But we want to distinguish Esau from the true Ethiopians. It's very clear Esau's descendants would overcome his brother's seed. 2 Ezra 6 and 9 says Esau is the end of the world, and Jacob the beginning of it that followeth. Esau was promised to rule the world. He even had ancestors whom Yahweh favored, like Job and Caleb, who entered the promised land alone. Caleb entered alone with Joshua among those who had escaped Egypt and were under 20 years old. All right. Now we will see that through Prester John, who is Esau, Edom, and the robber of Israel, we'll see that Prester John, Esau, Edom, was prophesied to exalt himself to fulfill the vision of the kingdom come promised to Yasharel but it is in Daniel 11:14 that it says that he would fall. In other words, he would try to recreate the kingdom of Israel and fulfill the vision, but he would fail. Okay? For how do we know? For he sought his blessing with many tears after it was given to Jacob. And this is why Esau Edom became the ultimate ruler of the Ethiopians, the other ancestors of Abraham and Isaac, Prester John. All right? So basically, Prester John takes over the identity of the Ethiopians, but we're going to see that these were all really a confederacy together, but apart on their own, the Ethiopians did have a very special priestly role and set apart place in Yah's heart. Why would Esau Edom become the ruler of all these nations that you can classify under the Ethiopians? Because his father Isaac in anger prophesied in Genesis 27:39 through 40, and Isaac his father answered Esau and said to him, behold, thy dwelling shall be the fatness of the earth and the dew of heaven from above, and by thy sword shalt thou live, and shalt serve thy brother. And it shall come to pass, when thou shalt have the dominion, that thou shalt break his yoke from off thy neck. All right? So that is what the whole Prester John thing is about how Esau does this and takes over the world and tries to fulfill the vision of manifesting the kingdom of heaven on earth. As I already said, Yah elected Jacob before Jacob and Esau were born and declared that he and his 12 tribe offspring alone were the genetic and spiritual seed of the promise. But salvation for the entire world would come of Yahusha, but also of the Yehudis and Yasharel, the northern kingdom. Yahuwah's witnesses unto the ends of the earth through the genetic and spiritual grafting in of all other nations into Yahuwah's house of prayer. Now, why am I saying this? Because the Ethiopians were among the genetically grafted in mixed multitude that Edom came to rule through Prester John, but they were also grafted into the seed of Israel to become part of that house of prayer for all nations. But, we're going to see that the first Ethiopians and other so-called Midianites were initially grafted in the righteousness of Yahuwah through Yasharel. And this is how they're different from Esau Edom. But you know what? Even Edom, like I said, through Job and Caleb, has his righteous descendants. Very few, but nonetheless, he does. Important to understand that the Ethiopians dwelled in the land of Shem in Elam, as I said earlier. From there, they moved into the land of Israel. And let's look at the prophecy of Abraham's land allotment to define Israel and the Ethiopians' relationship to it. All right? And it'll also help us to see that they settled in the land of Shem as Shemitic descendants of Abraham. Genesis 15:18 tells us that in the day that Yahuwah made a covenant with Abraham, saying, to thy seed will I give this land from the river of Egypt to the great river Euphrates. The great river Euphrates is very important because beyond the Euphrates is still in the land of Shem, but the great river Euphrates is the border, the outer border, the northeastern border, north and easternmost border of the land of Israel. All right? So Abraham's 6 sons of Ketura the Cushite and Ishmael, son of Hagar, went beyond Abraham's borders to remain in Elam, the land of Shem. So in Genesis 25, see this map of Elam. This is how Abraham sent them into Elam. But Abraham gave all his possessions to Isaac his son. But to the sons of his concubines, Abraham gave gifts, and he sent them away from his son Isaac while he was yet living to the east, into the country of the east. So this is the easternmost region of the land of Shem. But there is also to be, said to be a Chata, a Kusha, a Kutha, located near the Gihon River, which is said to surround the whole land of Cush. Now we'll come back to that later. So as we go into this, we're going to briefly see Ethiopia evolve to encompass many Shemitic mixed nations. They are a mixed multitude of many Shemitic mixed nations coming out of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But the shifting terminology encompasses these following groups. Why? So Edom could steal even their identities, and that's how he took over the identity of Israel. All right? So everybody becomes grafted in. That's Shem, Ham, and Japheth, okay? We're going to find the Ethiopians of today, the mixed multitude, the confederacy, are actually grafted in Shem, Ham, and Japheth, with Esau, Edom being their ruler and the ruler of the world by the sword. All right. Now, the Ethiopians of today are called Beta Israel. Their identity relates to Shem's area or Shem's land, which is then conflated with and evolved into, a mixed multitude known by the following terms: Kutha or Cathay or Choctaw, okay? Choctaw. They were known as Phoenicians. They were known as Sidonians. They were known as Midianites. They were known as Byzantines or even Samaritans. And this is in their various mixing in with Esau or Jacob, okay? Now, the context of how this occurs is in Genesis 25 and 1. Now we're going to begin with the fundamental true Ethiopians, all right? It says, then again, Abraham took, so again, this is his second wife. Abraham took a wife, and her name was Ketura, and she bare him Zimran and Jokshan and Medan and Midian and Ishbak and Shua. Okay? And Jokshan begat Sheba and Dedan. And the sons of Dedan were Asherim and Letushim and Lemumim. And the sons of Midian, Apher, which means Heber, all right, or Hebrew, and Hanok, and Abida, and Eldah, all right? So we see the name Midian above, which is why you're going to hear the Ethiopians are called Midianites sometimes, all right? But the reference that I've shown you here also provides some clues to who the Ethiopian people are. They are a dark-skinned people. How do we know? Zondervan's Bible Dictionary says Ham, the youngest son of Noah, born probably about 96 years before the flood, and one of 8 persons to live through the flood, he became the progenitor of the dark races, not the Negroes, but the Egyptians, Ethiopians, Libyans, and Canaanites. Zondervan Bible Dictionary. Now this says youngest son, but I believe he's the middle son. But regardless, we see that Ham is not the progenitor of the Negroes. All right? But of the Egyptians and Ethiopians and Libyans and Canaanites. Now, I don't believe he's a progenitor of the Libyans either. But the point of showing you this is that at the time Zondervan did this dictionary, he knew that the Negroes were not Hamites, and that's what's important to know, and that the Ethiopians are connected to Ham. All right? Now, Jeremiah 13 and 23 says, can an Ethiopian change his skin or a leopard his spots? Then may ye also do good that are accustomed to do evil. This is how we know the Cushitic Hamites are dark-skinned. And so, therefore, so must the Ethiopians be, because they were both Israel, the Negroes, Israel are the Negroes, and they are the dark-skinned Cushites. All right? Now, Ham or Kemet or Cam actually means land of the burnt faces. So that's what Kemet means. It means land of the burnt faces. All right? And we know that Israel and the Cushites were dark-skinned people. The Ethiopians also were 3 times grafted into the Abrahamic princely and kingly lines of the southern kingdom. And this makes the Ethiopians very special in Yahuwah's eyes. They are more special than Esau or any of these other groups, because we're going to see they were grafted in threefold to the king and priest lines. All right? But I'm showing you all these scriptures so you know they're a dark-skinned people. Now, we're going to just cover this here. Ketura was, as I said, Abraham's second wife. She was a Cushite. How do we know? Ketura had 6 sons, and 2 of her sons were named, or rather their offspring, after the 2 sons of Cush. All right? All right, so 2 of her sons named their sons after 2 sons of Cush.
May have possibly also named their lands Sheba and Dedan, because there's a lot of Sheba and Dedan going on in the territory of Israel. Now, Sheba and Dedan may have also been the names of lands in the land of Ham, so I'm still not 100% sure of that.
Abraham told them to go outside of Abraham's land into the land of Elam, which was part of the land of Shem. So now in Genesis 41:45, we see that Moses marries Zipporah, the daughter of Jethro, a descendant of Midian, and the son of Ketura the Cushite and Abraham. Well, the first grafting in was Abraham and Ketura. The second grafting in here, right? So the first was Ketura and Abraham. The second is Moses and Zipporah. And then the third grafting in of the Midianites is in Kings, when Solomon has a relationship with the Ethiopian queen of Sheba and begets a son. All right? So Ketura was a Cushite, and there is a distinction between them and the original Cushites in South America. The ATS Bible Dictionary has this to say about them. Cushites are a people who dwelt beyond the Euphrates and were transplanted into Samaria in the place of the Israelites who had before inhabited it. So remember, I told you they are called Samaritans sometimes. They came from the land of Cush or Cutha in the east, their first settlement being in the cities of the Medes, subdued by Shalmaneser and his predecessors. All right, and so you can look up Cush to see that. Now, the cities of the Medes were actually in the land of Shem. Get into that in part 2. All right, so the cities of the Medes were in Damascus, which was part of the land of the Aramites, actually Arphaxad. All right, so now here we're talking about the Ethiopian Cushites, who were a Shemitic mixture. All right, these are not the pure Cushites. In Kings 17:24, it says the king of Assyria brought men from Babylon and from Cutha or Cush or Chata, and from Ava and Hamath and Sepharvaim, and settled them into the cities of Samaria in place of the sons of Israel. All right, so he replaced them there, all right, to take over the identity. So they possessed Samaria and lived in its cities. At the beginning of their living there, they did not fear Yahuwah. Therefore, Yahuwah sent lions among them, which killed some of them. So they spoke to the king of Assyria, saying, the nations to whom you have carried away into exile in the cities of Samaria do not know the customs of the God of the land. So he sent lions among them, and behold, they killed them because they do not know the custom of the God of the land. All right? So there we have it. This, and through Solomon and Moses, is how the Cushite Ethiopian descendants of Abraham and Ketura learned the religious customs of Yasharel. Now, there's other ways they learned them, but remember, this was a mixed multitude. So not everybody was going along with the customs, because I believe the true Ethiopians did know them, all right? The Shemitic Ethiopians. And we'll show you in a second why. So, the Midianites settled in Elam next to Medo-Persia, as I said. All right? Next to the Medo-Persians, as I said. And the Medo-Persians were also called Midianites because they were also half Shemitic. These Ethiopians are they who were moved into Samaria, into the land of the Israelites, as I just said. So when Israel went captive to Egypt, the Midianites dwelt at Mount Sinai in Israel until Israel reclaimed the land. And they dwell in the tents of Kedar or Kafar. Kafar means young lion, and Kedar means black goat's hair. So we all know the reference to Song of Solomon. For those of you who don't, it evidences this in the statement that Solomon makes of his love towards the Shunammite from the tribe of Issachar. Now, the Shunammite in the Song of Solomon represents the genetic seed of Israel and Yahusha's love for her. All right? And what the Shunammite famously says in Song of Solomon is, "Dark, my skin is dark like the tents of Kedar," Song of Solomon 1:5. "My brothers made me keepers of the vineyard, but my own vineyard I have not kept." Now people want to say, oh, she got really dark in the sun, and that's why she's complaining. No, Israel lost the vineyard because she didn't care for it, because she went serving other gods and she became a harlot. And so the other nations took the vineyard from her. That's what she's talking about, okay? That's what it's symbolizing. It's not that she had to work out in the field and so she got really black and she's scared because she feels bad because her skin is black. She's just saying that her skin is dark like the tents of Kedar, and that's a beautiful thing. So now Kedar is associated with Qatar and Kadim, the word for to make a sacrifice or offer incense. So here, the tents of Kedar are the Ethiopian tents, okay? The tents of Kedar are associated with the Ethiopians and I believe the Ishmaelites also, okay? And they're dark black tents. And the Ishmaelites, like I said, and the Ethiopians both went to dwell in the extreme east beyond the river Euphrates, all right? But they would be set apart, as we see with Jethro, as we see with Sheba when she meets Solomon. They would be set apart to make sacrifice and offer incense unto Yahuwah. All right, so that's where you get this Qatar or Kadim word. All right, so this tells you spiritually they have a special set apart calling. Now, we'll get into that more and the other groups that mixed in with the Ethiopians, like the Ishmaelites. But for now, let's return to the geography of the land of Shem. So Prester John and the Ethiopians are key to this geography of the land of Shem, because this will enable us to understand how the Ethiopians and the three sons of Noah were grafted in, and how their legacy was co-opted or stolen by Prester John. I keep saying that over and over again because it can be confusing, but when you know who the true Ethiopians are, the Shemitic descendants, then it gets a lot clearer. When you understand Esau, Edom is the enemy, it gets even clearer, all right? And he's stealing identities, all right? So Yahuwah famously says about the Ethiopians in Amos 9 and 7, "Are you not like the people of Ethiopia to me, O children of Israel, says Yahuwah? Did I not bring up Israel from the land of Egypt, the Philistines from Caphtor, and the Syrians from Kir?" Now this lets us know that the Philistines did not originate in the land of Israel, but from Caphtor, as well as these other groups. I've used this statement because there is commonalities and things shared with the Ethiopians. They're special to Yahuwah, these Midianites and even the Ishmaelites who dwelt near them. But they look like, and they have a spiritual relationship with Israel. And that's why I quoted this quote, "Are you not like the people of Ethiopia to me, O children of Israel?"
This also means that the Ethiopians would have originated from the west, where the original Cush was, and they were brought up out of there into the land of Shem at some point. And that's how Ketura met Abraham.
So now, directionally, speaking of the geography now, the true land of Shem is both in the east and in the south, all right? It is both in the east and in the south. Now, false histories and old maps try to make the Hamites and their lands Israel, and Shem's land, their land, or Shem's land, even the land of Japheth. And that's not too far from what we're being sold today. But the land of Shem is both in the east and in the south. All right, so I want you to see on this map here.
I feel like you guys are a bit overloaded with information here. So let me know if you want to keep going. We do have, let me see, how far are we in? Well, we've got about 45 minutes to go. So should I just wait until maybe Friday to post the rest? But there's going to be more parts than this. There's probably going to be 3, maybe 4 parts. Who knows? So let me know how you feel. Put a 7 in the chat if you want to keep going. You know, we're going to back it up a little bit on Friday if I broadcast it on Friday.
Be sure to go to intoalltruth.net to pick up the Moedim Appointed Times calendar, as well as Chaya Eat Life and Fast, the Hebraic lifestyle and cookbook. It's also a health book to help you with your natural health the Hebraic way, according to the ways taught to Noah.
Arise up, O Yahweh, and let your enemies be scattered, and let those that hate you flee from before you. 2nd Exodus. Suva Yahuwah Rev Alat Yasharel. Return, O Yahuwah, to the countless thousands of Yasharel.